On the morning of December 19, 2001, a fisherman working the waters near Waldport, Oregon, spotted something in Lint Slough, a shallow coastal backwater where the Alsea River feeds toward the sea. He called the police. When officers arrived, they found the body of a small boy floating at the surface. He appeared to be around 4 years old. He was wearing only his underwear. There were no obvious external injuries. He was well-fed, clean, and clearly cared for, the kind of child that suggested a family who loved him. A weighted pillowcase, seemingly tied to his ankle, had come loose at some point before his body surfaced. Nobody had reported a child missing in the area. Nobody came forward to identify him. Police posted flyers. They knocked on doors. They circulated a digitally enhanced photograph through the small coastal communities south of Newport. For 3 days, the boy remained unidentified. Then divers went back into the water. 9 feet down, near the pilings of the Lint Slough Bridge, they found her. A little girl, 3 years old. She was inside a sleeping bag. A floral print pillowcase filled with rocks was still tied around her ankle, the weight that had kept her on the bottom while her brother floated free. Sadie Longo, 3 years old. The babysitter who had watched both children recognized their photographs immediately. She and her husband drove to the morgue and confirmed the identification. Their father, Christian Longo, was a part-time Starbucks employee who lived with his family in a condominium overlooking Yaquina Bay. He had gone to work the day after his children's bodies entered the water, told co-workers that his wife had left him, and continued showing up to shifts, attending a Christmas work party, and gifting a colleague a bottle of his wife's perfume. 8 days after Zachary and Sadie were found, divers pulled 2 large dark green suitcases from the shallow water directly in front of the Longo family's condominium. One contained the body of Mary Jane Longo, 34 years old, strangled, stripped, and forced into a fetal position. The other contained 2-year-old Madison. She had been packed alongside a dumbbell to keep the case submerged. By the time those suitcases were opened, Christian Longo was on a beach in Cancún, Mexico. Introducing himself as Michael Finkel. Journalist. New York Times. Christian Michael Longo was born in 1974 in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and raised as a Jehovah's Witness in a stable, middle-class home. By the accounts of people who knew him growing up, he was charming, personable, and ambitious, a young man who wanted things. Nice things. The kind of things that announce success. He was also, from an early age, a liar. Not in obvious ways that attracted attention. In the subtle, calibrated way of someone who had learned that a confident story, told smoothly and without hesitation, was usually enough. He fabricated academic achievements. He exaggerated professional accomplishments. He borrowed money with no intention of repaying it. He constructed a version of himself that bore a flattering resemblance to the real thing without actually being it. In 1993, at 19 years old, he married Mary Jane Baker, who was 26. She was a Jehovah's Witness, deeply devout, and entirely devoted to building a life with the man she believed Christian was. She managed a doctor's office, worked at a university dental school, and was, by every account given by people who knew her, a grounded, genuine, hardworking woman. They had 3 children. Zachary, born in 1997. Sadie, born in 1998. Madison, born in 1999. 3 children in 3 years. Mary Jane left work to raise them full-time. She trusted her husband to provide. Christian Longo could not provide. He could only perform providing. He launched a construction cleaning business that failed. He took jobs he was unsuited for and left them under ambiguous circumstances. He wrote checks that bounced. He ran up credit card debt that he had no means of repaying. He stole a credit card number from a customer making a purchase at Starbucks, the job he eventually took when nothing else was available. He gifted Mary Jane a minivan for her birthday that he had stolen. He was caught passing $30,000 in bad checks and was expelled from the Jehovah's Witness congregation, a social and spiritual humiliation that, for someone raised in that world, was total. He had a book in his apartment called The Modern Identity Changer. He had a Spanish phrasebook. He was, at some level, already planning for a version of his life in which he needed to become someone else entirely. By September 2001, the Longo family had fled a trail of fraud convictions and financial wreckage across Michigan and Ohio and arrived on the Oregon coast. Christian told the manager of the condominium complex that he was a subcontractor for a telecommunications company, surveying the coast for new infrastructure. He told him he had only 2 children. He had 3. He was working part-time at a Starbucks outlet in a local Fred Meyer department store. Mary Jane was at home with 3 children under the age of 5. They were about to be evicted again. On the evening of December 15th, a babysitter came to look after the children so that Christian and Mary Jane could go to dinner and a movie. They came home at 10:30 p.m. That was the last time anyone other than Christian Longo saw his wife or children alive. The night of December 16th. At approximately 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, December 16, 2001, the couple staying in the room directly above the Longo apartment were woken by sounds coming from below. Dragging sounds. Repeated, heavy dragging, continuing for between 5 and 15 minutes. They complained at the front desk the following morning. What investigators would later reconstruct from physical evidence and from Longo's eventual partial admissions is this. On the night of December 16th, a night Longo himself would later describe as the beginning of the end, he stood on his balcony looking out over the water, knowing the family was about to be evicted, unable to face telling his wife the truth of their situation one more time. He went inside and strangled Mary Jane. Then he strangled 2-year-old Madison. He packed both bodies into the large dark green suitcases he had sourced, weighting them with dumbbells he placed inside. He loaded the suitcases into his car and drove to the Embarcadero Marina. He broke a pipe under a ramp to create a point of entry and dropped both suitcases into the water directly below. Then he collected his 2 remaining sleeping children, Zachary, 4 years old, and Sadie, 3, and drove to the Lint Slough bridge. He threw them into the water. He attached pillowcases filled with rocks to their ankles to keep them submerged. He drove home. On Monday, December 17th, Christian Longo went to work at Starbucks from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. He told colleagues that Mary Jane had left him. He said she had been having a 3-year affair. She had taken the children and gone back to Michigan. They would not be coming back. He attended the Christmas work party. He gifted a female colleague a bottle of Mary Jane's perfume. He rented a movie from Blockbuster. He played volleyball with friends. He returned to the condominium each evening and slept in the apartment where, 3 days before, he had killed his wife and youngest daughter. On December 19th, Zachary's body surfaced. The pillowcase tied to his ankle had come loose. That same day, Christian Longo drove to a car dealership in Wilsonville, south of Portland, and swapped the Longo family's stolen red minivan, license plate reading, Kid Van, for a green Dodge Durango he took without payment. Inside the minivan, police would later find toys, sleeping bags, cell phones, diving gear, and a copy of a book called Running from the Law. He drove the Durango to San Francisco. He applied for a job at a Starbucks there, listing his Newport store as a reference. The San Francisco manager called Newport. Newport staff immediately called the police. The stolen Durango was found abandoned at San Francisco Airport. Christian Longo had already boarded a flight, purchased with the stolen credit card number he had skimmed from a customer in November, bound for Cancún, Mexico. On December 22nd, divers found Sadie's body in the water near the Lint Slough bridge, still tethered. On December 27th, the suitcases containing Mary Jane and Madison were pulled from Yaquina Bay. That same day, the FBI placed Christian Longo on their 10 most wanted list. At that particular moment in history, December 2001, 3 months after the September 11th attacks. The name directly above his on that list was Osama bin Laden. At the beach resort in Tulum, a coastal community near Cancún popular with backpackers and budget travelers, Christian Longo arrived tanned, relaxed, and socially magnetic. He told everyone he met that his name was Michael Finkel. He said he was a journalist, a writer for the New York Times. He had, in fact, read and admired Finkel's work in the Times, National Geographic, and Sports Illustrated before his firing. He chose the name because he respected the work attached to it. The identity was not random. It was, in its way, an act of admiration and appropriation at the same time. He snorkeled. He went to bars. He socialized with other travelers. He began a romantic relationship with a German tourist who had no idea who he was or what he had left behind in Oregon. He carried his own genuine identification, made no particular effort to disguise himself, and occasionally used his own name or a variation of it. He was not hiding in the shadows. He was standing in the sun. While he was there, a Canadian tourist at the same resort recognized his photograph when the story broke internationally. The tourist contacted the FBI. On January 13, 2002, 28 days after the murders, Mexican authorities and FBI agents located Christian Longo. He was taken into custody without resistance. His German companion watched in bewilderment as the man she had known as a charming New York Times journalist was handcuffed and led away. He was calm. He was cooperative. He did not appear surprised. He was extradited to Oregon and charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder. The real Michael Finkel received a phone call in February 2002 from a reporter at a San Francisco newspaper. He assumed it was about his own downfall. Finkel had been fired from the New York Times Magazine just days before Zachary Longo's body surfaced in December 2001. He had fabricated a composite character in an investigative piece about child slavery in West Africa, a significant ethical violation that ended his career at the Times abruptly and publicly. He had retreated to his home in Montana, professionally disgraced, with no clear path forward. The call was not about his fabrication. The call informed him that the man accused of murdering his wife and 3 children in Oregon had been living in Mexico under Finkel's name. Had been introducing himself to strangers as Michael Finkel of the New York Times. Finkel was simultaneously horrified and, by his own admission, intrigued. He called the Lincoln County Jail in Oregon. Christian Longo, who had agreed to speak to no other journalist, agreed to speak to him. The logic, from Longo's perspective, was that Finkel, disgraced, professionally hungry, personally invested, was controllable in a way that a conventional reporter would not be. Finkel needed the story as badly as Longo needed an audience. What followed over the course of the next year was one of the strangest correspondences in American true crime history. Weekly phone calls. Visiting room meetings. Nearly 1,000 pages of handwritten letters. 2 men, both of whom had built public versions of themselves on foundations of fabrication, finding in each other a mirror they did not entirely want to look at. Longo was using Finkel as a sounding board for the story he intended to tell the jury, testing the logic of his defense narrative against a seasoned journalist's scrutiny. Finkel was using Longo as the story that might restore a career. Both men understood, at some level, what the other was doing. Neither fully admitted it. Finkel later described it as less of a cat-and-mouse game than a cat-and-cat game. At trial in 2003, Christian Longo mounted a defense that stunned the courtroom. He admitted to killing Mary Jane and Madison. He pleaded guilty to those charges. But for the deaths of Zachary and Sadie, the 2 children found in Lint Slough, he claimed innocence. His account was this, that Mary Jane, having finally discovered the full extent of his lies, had killed the 2 oldest children herself in a fit of violent despair. That he had come home to find them gone and Madison gravely injured. That in an anguished, panicked response he had killed Mary Jane and then made the agonizing decision to end Madison's suffering. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Longo was convicted on all 4 counts of aggravated murder and sentenced to death by lethal injection. In 2009, Longo contacted Finkel from death row. He said he was ready to tell the truth. He had killed all 4 of them. He strangled Mary Jane during a moment of intimacy, during lovemaking, he said. He threw Zachary and Sadie off the Lint Slough bridge while they were still breathing. The pillowcases. The rocks. The water. The living children. He said he was now ready to be executed. He wanted to donate his organs upon death. He launched a campaign, an organization called GAVE, Gifts of Anatomical Value from the Executed, to change execution methods to allow organ harvesting from condemned prisoners. He gave interviews. He was articulate, organized, and visibly at ease with the camera. The people who had known the family, who had babysat those children, attended the makeshift memorial on the Lint Slough bridge, identified the little faces in the photographs, found his composure very difficult to witness. In December 2022, Oregon Governor Kate Brown commuted the death sentences of all prisoners on Oregon's death row, including Longo's, to life without the possibility of parole. Christian Longo remains at Oregon State Penitentiary. He will die there. Mary Jane Longo was 34 years old. She had married a man she believed in. She had spent 8 years building a life with him, raising 3 children under the age of 5, trusting him to be what he said he was. She was, by every account from people who knew her, a devoted, grounded, genuine woman. She deserved a partner who was any of those things. Zachary was 4. Sadie was 3. Madison was 2. They went into the water on a December night off the Oregon coast because their father decided that the alternative, facing the wreckage of the life he had constructed, was something he was not willing to do. No rage. No psychotic break. No dramatic final confrontation. An evening on a balcony, looking at the water. A decision made. And then the systematic removal of every person who might complicate the next chapter of his story. The detail that stays, the one that the people who covered this case have returned to again and again, is not the resort, or the beach, or the German tourist, or the journalist whose name he borrowed. It is the pillowcases. That he tied weighted pillowcases around the ankles of his sleeping children before throwing them off a bridge in the dark. That Zachary's came loose. That Sadie's held. That one of them floated up. And one of them didn't. Christian Longo has described himself, in letters and interviews, as a narcissist. He has said he studied the psychology and came to agreement with it. He said it with a kind of detached intellectual composure that, to those who know what he did, is perhaps the most unsettling thing he has ever said. Because it means he understood himself. He simply did not stop.